Good afternoon. This is Mary de la Barca, and today is January 16th. And here we are with Rulis, Gonzalez, discussing a little bit about his views on food and so forth. For the record, we'll begin by your name, where are you from, where were you born? So just.
Well, my name is Raul Gonzalez. I was born in Chihuahua, but right after being born, 6 weeks, we moved to Quito, Ecuador, and lived down there for about 6 years. And then we moved back to Parral with my grandmother, and I was there for first grade, and then moved to El Paso in the second grade, and have been living here ever since.
So your family is from Parral, from Chihuahua?
The family, yes, it's from Parral, my mom, and Chihuahua, my dad.
What took you to Quito?
My grandfather was in the lumber business, and my dad followed in his footsteps, and they opened a sawmill in Santo Domingo, which was a few hours from the capital city.
And what brought you and your family to El Paso?
Again, the business was kind of integrated, and they were doing raw wood from the Sierra Madre, from the company down in Ecuador, and they my dad actually started making picture frames and molding. So my grandfather had Duraply, so it was a process where they get the raw wood, they would process it into plywood, or in my dad's case, process it into construction molding and then picture frames. And so the business was set up in Casas Grandes, but the U.S. operations were set up in El Paso, and that's what got us over here.
And how old were you when you came to El Paso? 6? 7?
Yeah, started the second grade here.
So, can you describe a little bit of life in El Paso from your childhood on?
Lots of family. I remember summers were like cookouts every weekend. We had a pool, and so my cousins and when my family would come into town from Chihuahua or just Mexico, we have family all over Mexico. It was always, centered around food. And I remember just having a very happy childhood, just eating a lot and going to school and visiting family and
where do you go to school? Like elementary and high school?
Yeah, elementary I went to Loreto, and then I went to Eastwood Heights, because Loreto turns all girls after 5th grade. And then I went to Eastwood Middle School and Eastwood High School, and I have a finance degree from Utah. So all my formative years were spent here in El Paso.
When you were young and living at home, were there some particular foods that your mother cooked, or who cooked at home, and what were those foods?
My mom was stay-at-home mom, and she would cook. So we would eat at school, whatever we were fed at school. But the tradition at the house was at 3 o'clock when we came home from school, my dad would come home from work, and so we were still on the Mexican schedule for years and years and years after we had already been living here. And we always had lunch at the house together. And my mom cooked everything, everything. And my dad loves to eat, and he's the one that started to feed me regular food when we were living in Ecuador. So it was just the love of food was instilled from an early age, and eating with the family and that times that we spent together was always around that. But ultimately, what I always, no matter what my mom cooked, whatever she cooked, I would end up making tacos out of it. So
Tacos.
yeah, it could have been spaghetti, it could have been Chinese food, whatever it was. I always ended up putting it in a tortilla at sometime of, during the meal. It'd be like, okay, and I just loved eating it that way. So, but yeah, she could cook anything.
When you were in Ecuador, what were some of the foods that you were introduced there?
Lots of seafood, oysters, clams, mussels, angulas. We used to eat a lot of angulas. Deer. This is the first time I had venison. Was over there. Trout. My dad used to go fishing, and he'd bring home trout. And that's the main thing that I remember over there. It's a lot of the seafood, octopus. We would eat a lot of octopus. Yeah, more than beef and anything, I remember the seafood.
And when you came to El Paso, how did that scene, the cooking scene, change? The eating scene?
Well, we were eating similar because my mom was still cooking. So the ingredients changed a little bit, but the food itself, I think, was still, the same because it was still the same person making it. But obviously, being in El Paso at the formative years, I got a opportunity to experience a lot of different cuisines here. And I guess because my dad loves to eat, and because he was always looking for those flavors, there's been Middle Eastern food in El Paso for a long time, and Chinese food for a long time. They people may not see it. They think it's only Mexican food, but there's a huge Middle Eastern community that started to form in, around 1890. So by the time we came around, there was already, 4 or 5 generations of families that were cooking, and so there were restaurants, and so we would eat those things. In the 80s, when the maquilas came and the Japanese came, sushi started popping up. And my dad loves sushi, and so having the opportunity to eat it often, my dad just went crazy and would take us to eat sushi all the time. So I became a fan. Well, my 14th birthday was actually at a Japanese restaurant. That's where I wanted it. I wanted to go have sushi for my 14th birthday. And so we ate, Mexican, of course, but we had everything because there was so much, around here. And I remember one of the school trips, when still in elementary, they took us out to the Tigua Reservation and eating the fry bread and all that. So, all of those different, like cultures and their food, that's what I was exposed to living here, So, I don't think everybody had the same experience that grew up here, but not everybody had a dad like mine. So I think that's the difference.
One other more personal question, and then we'll go back to what we were just talking about food. Are you married? Have children?
I'm with my partner. We have a 2.5-year-old, my daughter, Sophia. And from a previous marriage, my son is going to be 27. So 24 years gap between the oldest and the youngest.
That's great. Moving to a little bit of the background on food, which we already mentioned some, so we're going to go back. So if you needed to narrow down where your interest in food came from, is it your father, passion for food, or how would you articulate your interest in food?
I would say that my dad definitely instilled the the love of flavor and food in me. In Quito, I remember, he worked a lot, but we would get together for like football games, soccer, and we would have botanas, and that's when he would open the sardines and smoked oysters and the angulas I talked about, and so eating, like, the memorable parts were with him, and the sushi because he took me there, and because my mom is she's an awesome cook, but there's a lot of things that she doesn't like. She'll, like, now that we have the restaurant, she'll cook them, but she never cooked lamb, she never cooked tuna, and my dad loves all that stuff. And so, my dad was the one that kind of took us out and let us experience all those different flavors and things like that. Now the skills, are obviously my mom's. I think that's, I inherited that from her. But the person that actually got me interested was my dad.
So how young were you when you started cooking?
When I really started getting into it, I was 15, and again, it was because my dad got home, and he bought a rice maker, he brought sushi, he brought a bamboo mat, and he bought everything, all the ingredients necessary to make sushi rolls. And it was because there was a sushi restaurant that my dad used to frequent all the time, and after I don't know how many months, he became friends with the sushi chef, and the sushi chef showed him how to make some of these cuts and how to make the rice, and so my dad kind of learned by seeing him and talking to him, and he decided, well, I'm ready to do it myself. And so he came home, and I was like, let's do this. And so that was the first thing that I learned to actually do by myself. And so I impressed my friends in high school because I could make sushi.
Have you been taking formal culinary classes?
No. It's been all doing and cooking shows and cookbooks and magazines and all of that, but more important is just doing it, just cooking, just getting familiar with ingredients and experimenting around.
To what extent do you think, or does memory and the senses play when you cook?
Oh, it's everything. It is absolutely everything. I mean, you'll taste something and immediately you'll be like, boom, like right back to where you first had that. And to me, that's such a unique thing, with the memory and the senses. But that it happens with smells, and it happens with taste. You can venison, for example. I had venison the first time I was probably 5, and I remember tasting it, and I remember it like blowing my mind. But I never really asked, because my dad never really told me. He was just like, here, taste this. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I never really, thought much about it, especially when you're 5 years old, right? But then when I was in 6th grade, one of my friends, we had show and tell, and he went hunting with his dad, and he brought venison, and I had it in class, and I was like, that's that's that flavor. And I remember, and every time I taste it, and I'm thinking about it right now, it's like it takes me back to that restaurant where we were at, and it was a party, and there was a lot of people, and I remember that's when I first had that taste, and I think that the beautiful thing about it is when people travel and they taste food when they're traveling, that's something that you come home and you cook the same meal or you have the same wine, and you relive that whole experience, and it's just such a powerful way to ingrain things into your brain. You know, it's incredible. It's amazing.
In what ways do you think that that food embodies history and embodies culture?
In what way?
Or how does food, or does it?
Oh, indeed. I mean, food is substance. So I think in the beginning, you know, that's what early humans did. They hunted for food, for subsistence, and as civilization developed, then, you know, taste buds developed, and, you know, and then you see how food helped evolve the brain, how we evolved as humans through food, through nutrition, and how food helped form civilization, and, you know, prior to money. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold. So before money, people traded spices. You know, they traded salt. You know, even close to here, we have the salt flats just up the road, and it was just so important. You know, that salt was so important that, you know, people went to war over it. You know, and so at every point in history, food, you know, plays a role, not only in keeping us alive, I think, but also, you know, especially in the early days as trading, and so people saw value in that. But then you also have the history of how, as civilization grows, well, how do you keep food? You know, and so then came curing and fermentation, and, you know, these techniques that, you know, helped to keep food longer, so you could feed more people. You know, you grew more, but you had to store it, and so civilization is always going to be, you know, it's always going to revolve around food. You know, and I think now is the first time, I think, in history where food now is something that's a hobby for people. That's you know, people are now starting to appreciate food, you know, more. I think when the world started getting smaller, I say, you know, food is the first thing that, you know, that you experience when you travel and things like that. So it's just an important part of the world and the evolution of it.
I couldn't agree with you more. Tell me a little bit of your feelings about your views on the debates or the difference between the food industry versus sustainability.
Yeah.
Because they don't always go together.
They don't. No. The problem with the food, with big food, you know, with you know, with corporate farming and things like that is, as much as I love capitalism, if it goes unchecked, you know, bad things start to happen. History, I think, has shown us that. You know, they start to cut corners, and you start to use insecticides, and you start to use things to, get better yields on your crops, and you start losing some things here and there, and you get to the point where we are now, where if you go to the store and you buy chicken, they are the size of turkey, and that's not natural. So I think the industrialization of food caused a loss of flavor, and it made food unhealthier, and sustainability is important, because we only have one Earth, and there's only so much space. But I think corporations, because they're trying to turn a profit, and they're trying to, well, they're not trying, they've been quite effective in telling people what to consume and making it about convenience and things like that. So I think that probably from the late 50s on, the fast food industry started to ruin, and eventually, in my opinion, ruined the meat industry. It ruined a lot of agriculture, and it just, I think people lost sight, corporations, because again, because they're going for the profit, they lose sight of sustainability, of the way things are supposed to work. And it's not always a bad thing, but if natural forces were at work, El Paso would never be this big, because the agricultural center that it used to be back in the 1800s, into the turn of that century, that was able to support the community, and that's really what it was. I mean, you grew what you needed for your community, and somehow it just became more, and then other forces acted on, it wasn't just food, obviously, but somewhere the disconnect happened, and now it's important to kind of get awareness out there, so that people understand that it's not just about it's not about eating, it's about knowing what you're eating, where it's coming from, and a lot of people don't know where it's coming from, and we've had very interesting conversations about sustainability, and vegetarians and vegans get into the conversation, and they have their points of view, and so it's an interesting place right now, I think, for when it comes to food.
Which takes us to an interesting place to talk specifically about you as a chef, as a business owner. So how did Rulis International Kitchen came about? Why the emphasis on the international? Can you tell us?
Yeah, well, the idea behind it came when I was living in Houston. It was towards the end of my career as a wealth manager. I had been getting very tired of it. The business part of it, I just didn't like anymore. And one day, I just realized that cooking was my zen, and when I'm behind a grill or a stove, I Well, I'll tell you a funny story about that. At the new restaurant, we're cooking gumbo.
The name of the restaurant?
Oh, Benny Frank's. Yes, at Benny Frank's, we're cooking gumbo. And I've been cooking it for probably 15 years now. And when it came time to put the recipe down, I was like, and I wrote down the recipe and I was like, does that sound right? And no, because and then I told my chef de cuisine, I was like, I had to stop cooking like a grandma and start cooking like a chef. I said, because I've been cooking this so long that I never needed a recipe. But it's a restaurant, and so I need to put the recipe down so my cooks can replicate it. And so at that point, I had to step back and actually watch what I was doing, because it came so naturally to me. Again, it was my zen. I didn't have to think about it. It just happened, you know. And after 2-3 hours, boom, there you go. And that's when I realized that, you know, that it was time to move on. And so I moved back to El Paso, and I told my parents, you know, that we were going to open the restaurant.
What year was this?
In 2008. And the reason for international was because I didn't want to do just, you know, one specific cuisine. And because as I said earlier, growing up, you know, I was eating Chinese, Japanese, Middle Eastern, Spanish cuisine. So I'm eating all these different cuisines, and it's all in El Paso, which is an international border. And it's an international border, and so I was like, well, this is an international kitchen, because there is so much different culture here that qualifies, you know, the food to be just something really different. And then it's evolved from there.
Are most of the recipes your creations or modifications?
A lot of them are. My mom has had a few that are in there. And now that I hired Mateo, the new menu is going to have a lot more of his influence in there. But at the beginning, I'd say it was 90% mine. I think right now it's probably 70% mine. And then after next week, when we start to unveil the new menu, Mateo's stuff has my blessing, because his philosophy and my philosophy are very similar. So,
can you share your philosophy and Mateo's philosophy about food?
Well, it's about drawing from the area. All our ideas, we don't have to go very far. At the beginning, you know, when you start cooking, of course you want to go to all these different places to bring, you know, flavors and things like that, and that's still fun to do. But I think that whatever you can gather, you know, within a few miles of here, I think is just more local. So it's more about the local flavor, the terroir, if you will, of what we have to offer in the region. And so we both feel strongly about local ingredients, local sources, you know, local producers. From an economic standpoint, you know, it's a win-win. You keep the money in the community, and it's still hard to do right now, but it's easier now than it was, you know, 11 years ago. And so it's getting there.
This brings me to we're talking about local ingredients and sort of rooting ourselves, grounding ourselves in a community, in our foods here. tell me about an event that you did not too long ago called La Cosecha.
Mm-hmm. That
La Cosecha.
La Cosecha was a dinner that came about the relationship we have with one of our local farmers. They own La Capilla, is the name of the farm, and we get chiles from them. We get tomatoes. We get whatever they have in season. We try and use on the menu. And a conversation that I had with the owner's son, and we said, it'd be really neat to have a dinner out on the farm where people can see where the food that's on their plate is coming from. And so the idea stemmed from that. So the dinner ended up being 8 courses of all food that was locally all locally harvested, and we did cooking methods that were ancient. We cooked lamb 2 ways. One of them was we covered it in clay. The clay came from the Rio Grande. Mateo went and scooped up clay from the side, and we made the mud, and we covered the leg in achiote, from the from the cactus, and then we covered it in the clay, and we put it in the wood-fired oven overnight, basically, and it cooked in there. And when we served it, it looked like a big clump of clay, but once we cracked it, the vapor came out, and the flavor started to you could smell it, and then we just crack open, and everybody at the table was like, wow. Corn, Mateo did atole. There was a corn vinegar dressing for the salad. We did a sprouted corn with lamb that tasted like a combination of Vietnamese pho and Mexican pozole. It was amazing. We did a sope. So we did corn in about 5 different ways. There was a corn crema that we did on a smoked trout. And so of the 8 courses, 5 of them had corn, but you could not tell which was which because they were all so different. And the corn is so humble, but it can be made into so many things and used in so many ways. It's an amazing, it's an amazing crop, and really it turned out to be an ode to corn that day, for sure. And we held it out at the farm. We picked the date so we would have a full moon or close to a full moon, and we got out there as the sun was setting over the Camino Real, because their farm sits in front, north of what used to be the original Camino Real, and so you saw the sunset over that, and then the full moon over the mountains, and that was all part of the experience that we wanted people to see, and it was just an amazing event. Not only the food, but the ambiance and the way people reacted to those stories, because I think that's the thing that makes a food great, when you know the story behind it, the process, and when you respect it, that makes it better.
What's of all this I think respecting food is important. I think that's a very key.
Oh, yeah.
You kind of develop this respect for food. In my work, I call it developing a food consciousness, which includes respect. In terms of all the ingredients, which are locally produced ingredients as much as possible, what would you say is the most important ingredient in any kind of cooking?
Love. Love, indeed. I mean, it's we talk about it, and it's and in Mexican culture, your feelings, your passion goes into your food. That's why when the salsa is real hot, the first thing a Mexican will say is like, "¿Quién hizo encabronar al cocinero?" You know. and in movies like Water for Chocolate, which is funny because the main character is based on my dad's side of the family, the Muskis.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Santa Rosa, where the movie is based, eventually got renamed Muskis because it was Santa Rosa, Coahuila, and it got renamed Muskis, Coahuila, because of my great grandfather, who was Melchor Muskis. He was the governor of the Estado de Mexico and served as interim president in 1838. So he's listed as the 6th president of Mexico. And the writer is friends with one of my dad's cousins.
Laura Esquivel?
And so she based the characters off of that. So that's why it was in Santa Rosa, and that's why it's Roberto Muskis, because of my dad's cousins.
That is fascinating.
Yeah. Well, and then she cooks those chiles, and nogada, and her love goes in there.
Bringing chiles en nogada. Tell me about why you decided to do chiles en nogada.
Well, one, it's one of my favorite dishes, and I wanted to do them because they're so unique, and no one was really doing them. And when we first started in 2008, I wanted to get people into seasonality. We failed miserably at it because the moment we tried to take off poblanos to change something else, people were already hooked on our soup, and so they gave me hell for a week. Why'd you take it off? Well, they're not in season. I see them at the supermarkets, and you can still make it, and so eventually we had so many people that were that upset that we were like, okay, we'll make them. And so we kept it on there. But on the chiles en nogada with the pomegranate and everything, we wanted to showcase it as Mexico's national dish. And I like to tell people that Mexican food is more than what we have here. We have great Mexican food, there's no doubt. But our Mexican food it's a regional thing, because if you go down to Mexico City, they're not eating what we're eating up here. And if you go down to Oaxaca, they're definitely not eating what we're eating up here. But it's still Mexican food, It's just, it's regional, like everything else. And so that dish, I just wanted to show people that there's more to Mexican food than, just enchiladas and, tacos and stuff. But, and it became a tradition. So it's been, we've served it 11 years now.
I was waiting from August. Yes, time for chiles en nogada. Tell me a little bit about sort of ways in which you see helping the community in terms of events that you participated?
Mm-hmm. Well, we've done a lot. We've done a lot of work with the March of Dimes.
Mm-hmm.
We've done a lot of work with the El Paso Rotary Club, and the events that they held, that they hold. They're an opportunity for us to showcase some of the things that we do, and it gives us an opportunity to educate the public, because we want people to open up their palates and open up. Because as you open up your palate, you actually open up your mind, because you're opening it up to a new experience, and so those platforms, serve many purposes. Obviously, gathering money for a charitable cause, but also, educating people and opening people up to, the possibilities that are out there,
Mm-hmm.
with food and everything else. And the community keeps us open. We're essentially a neighborhood, restaurant, grill, bar, and we have people coming from all over the city, but our neighborhood here is what really, supports us. And so because the community supports us, we want to give back to the community, because without them, we wouldn't be here. So it's important for me to be able to give back and say thanks.
Great. One final question. What can you describe what food should mean, or what food means or should mean to all of us?
Man, that, I think, kind of takes us back to the question of sustainability. First, we need to understand that that food is perishable, that food is not easy. It's not easy to be a farmer. It's not easy to be a rancher. It takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of people, and it's a process that I don't think most people appreciate. Because they now just go to the supermarkets and pick up packages and go home, and they do that. But I think people should be more aware of where their food is coming from, and be more respectful of it, because it's what nourishes you. Food is the medicine that keeps you healthy. Our ancestors ate healthier than we do today, even though we have more income, we have more things to do, but we have horrible diets, and I think people need to understand where their food is coming from, and I think that's important. I've been saying this. I sort of came to this realization for the cosecha, for example. We slaughtered a lamb, and Mateo had hunted, but he had never slaughtered something so close range, and so it's an intimate thing, and it's an emotional thing. You're taking a life, and I told him, I said, after all was said and done, And a few days later, I said, I think everybody needs to see this, you know, because obviously we did it in a very respectful way, and you honor the animal that you take by not wasting it. So we used every, you know, everything, you know. I let him keep the hide, and he's tanning it. He's gonna make a rug for his daughter, you know. But we ate the offal. We cooked everything. We still have some of it frozen. You know, we're gonna end up eating it. We just haven't come around to it. But that's how you respect the animal. You know, it gives its life, its energy, and you know, for your life, you know, and so it's a great sacrifice that they make. So you have to treat it with respect. But I think if everybody saw that process, I think we'd have a lot more vegetarians. And if we have more vegetarians, then the meat industry wouldn't be. The meat industry would become more sustainable than it is right now. Because right now, people are eating meat, and they don't even know what it takes to get it to the table, you know, or to the plate, or, you know. But if they did, they might say, well, no, maybe not. And if that consumption would drop, then the beef that is left can be grown, you know, without hormones, without, you know, having to, you know, do steroids and do, you know, all the stuff that they do. Again, industrialized food, no good, you know, and I think if people saw that and experienced that, and if they said, well, I'm still going to eat it because it's delicious, then more power to you. And if you say, you know what, that was heartbreaking, I'm not going to eat meat anymore, well, then good for you too, you know. But you need to, but I think once you see it and you make the decision based on that, then you have more respect for it. Not only for the food, but also for the people that, you know, gather that food for you. And that's really what it's about.